He was the fierce warrior with a mohawk, turning brutal knockouts into must-watch spectacles. The fallen Iceman, Chuck Liddell, did not just compete in the UFC. He defined its climb to worldwide glory. With a steely gaze and fists like steel, he dominated the light heavyweight division, crushing opponents and filling arenas like a superstar. Yet, in the unforgiving world of combat sports, heroes rarely get happy endings. Chuck lingered too long in the cage. Now, at 54, his life is a quiet tragedy. His speech is labored, his body worn, and the fearless fighter fans once adored now move through public events as a faint echo of his past. He gave all to the sport, but it moved on without him. This is the story of Chuck Liddell's heartbreaking decline, how fame faded to obscurity, how triumphs turned to crushing losses, and how a legend of the octagon became a stark reminder of why some fighters cannot retire until the damage demands it. Long before he topped fight cards and starred in highlight reels, Chuck Liddell was a scrappy kid from Santa Barbara with a fire inside. Born on December 17, 1969, he grew up in a turbulent home, raised by a single mother. His father left early, leaving Chuck, the eldest of four, to protect his family. Money and stability were scarce, so Chuck learned to survive through fighting before his teenage years. At 12, he started training in Kyokan karate, a tough style that required focus. Chuck was not naturally disciplined, but he loved the thrill of combat. In high school, he excelled in football and wrestling and gained a reputation for brawling outside class. At Cal Poly, he wrestled at the NCAA Division I level and earned an accounting degree, but numbers never called him. His true lessons came in California's gritty gyms and rough bars, where bare-knuckle fights shaped him. After college, he moved to kickboxing and found a home at John Hackelman's Pit Gym in San Luis Obispo. There, the Iceman took shape, not just a nickname, but a chilling persona. Chuck stayed calm, never boasting or flinching. He entered fights with a cold stare and left opponents knocked out. His teammates called him icy before bouts and frostier after. When the UFC called in 1998, Chuck faced no easy path. He debuted at UFC 17, earning a hard-fought decision over Noe Hernandez. From there, he built his name not with flash, but with ferocity. The sport was raw then, with no fancy uniforms or big sponsors, just cages, blood, and grit. Chuck shone in that chaos. His striking style broke rules. He kept his hands low, chin open, but his timing was lethal. He lured fighters in, then dropped them with devastating counterpunches. The Iceman did not just win. He ended fights with authority. Still, no one foresaw this quiet destroyer becoming the face of a global sport. Fame was not his goal, but it was coming fast. The early 2000s were a wild time for MMA. The UFC struggled with money, faced bans in several states, and was labeled barbaric by many. It needed a hero, and Chuck Liddell became that hero by crushing every challenge. From 2001 to 2004, he tore through the division, outstriking stars like Vitor Belfort and Renato Sobral with precision. In 2004, he beat Tito Ortiz in a heated rivalry that drew massive crowds. His mohawk, cold stare, and DMX walkout music became legendary. Chuck was not just fighting, he was creating a legacy. Fans loved his daring style. Hands low, inviting danger, but always ready to strike. His footwork was clever, his punches explosive. One or two hits, and the fight was done. Crowds roared, but Chuck walked away stone-faced, as if it were just another day. In 2003, he fought in Pride against Quinton Rampage Jackson and lost, revealing flaws but adding to his story. The loss made him human, and his comeback was epic. Back in the UFC, he knocked out Randy Couture at UFC 52 in 2005, claiming the light heavyweight title before a huge audience. He did not just hold the belt, he ruled it. He knocked out Jeremy Horn, Renato Sobral, and Tito Ortiz again, each finish more iconic than the last. His fights headlined major pay-per-views. His face appeared on billboards, his name in songs. He starred on TV shows like Entourage, appeared on Late Night with Conan O'Brien, and landed commercial deals. Chuck was no longer just a fighter, he was a star. But in combat sports, the higher you climb, the harder you fall. Chuck was at his peak, unaware the ground beneath him was crumbling. At his height, Chuck Liddell owned the light heavyweight division. He was not just winning, he was demolishing foes. The UFC, revitalized under Zuffa, built its brand around him. His bald head, beard, mohawk, and knockouts made him a fan favorite. After taking the belt from Couture in 2005, he went on a rampage, avenging losses and settling scores. His knockout of Jeremy Horn was personal. His rematch with Sobral lasted 95 seconds. At UFC 66, his rematch with Tito Ortiz broke pay-per-view records with over 1.1 million buys. Chuck was the UFC's cornerstone, but fame brought pressure. He appeared at events, parties, and on TV, promoting beer brands and doing national press. The Iceman was a cultural icon, but his focus waned. Training became less strict, sparring too intense. Rumors spread of late-night partying. Chuck later admitted he was not always disciplined. He still had power and durability, but the signs were there. In 2007, at UFC 71, he faced Rampage Jackson again. Jackson knocked him out cold. The image of Chuck unconscious shook fans. The invincible Iceman had fallen. Yet, he returned months later, refusing to quit, believing he could reclaim his throne. Chuck's legend rested on his iron chin, the belief he could absorb any punch and hit back harder. For years, it held true. He faced heavy hitters without blinking. But in 2007, that durability cracked. After losing to Jackson, he fought Keith Jardine and looked sluggish, losing by split decision. It was not a knockout, just a strange, flat performance. Then, at UFC 88 in 2008, Rashad Evans landed a perfect overhand right. Chuck collapsed, arms stiff, eyes empty. The crowd gasped, commentators fell silent. Even Dana White, watching cageside, looked shaken. The Iceman's aura was gone. Still, Chuck fought on. In 2009, he faced Mauricio Shogun Rua at UFC 97. He started strong, but Shogun caught him, and Chuck crumpled against the cage. Another knockout, another painful image. Dana White publicly urged him to retire, saying he cared too much to watch Chuck continue. Chuck refused, insisting fighters fight. To him, stopping meant losing himself. The knockouts were not bad luck. They were signs of damage, but Chuck could not see it, or would not. Chuck was loyal to the UFC, staying when others chased bigger paydays elsewhere. That loyalty earned him respect. After the Shogun loss, Dana offered him a way out, an executive role as vice president of business development. It came with a salary and respect, a rare gesture in fighting. Chuck accepted, attending events in suits, smiling for cameras. But he was not built for desks. He craved the cage. Friends said he never left fight mode, still training and sparring. Fans asked when he would return, fueling his urge. Financial strain added pressure. Chuck had earned millions, but lived large. Big homes, fast cars, Vegas nights. When the money slowed, failed businesses and legal battles followed. He never confirmed money troubles, but signs were clear. Then he hinted at a comeback. Dana was furious, vowing Chuck would not fight in the UFC. But other promoters saw opportunity. When Oscar De La Hoya's Golden Boy MMA announced Chuck versus Tito Ortiz 3, fans were not excited. They were worried. Chuck's last UFC fight came in 2010 against Rich Franklin at UFC 115. It was meant to prove he still had it. Early on, he looked sharp, landing punches and kicks. Commentators wondered if he could turn back time. But late in the round, Franklin, despite a broken arm, landed a short hook. Chuck fell hard, another knockout, another blank stare. Dana, cage side, was livid. He declared Chuck done, barring him from UFC fights. Chuck's name faded from posters and title talks. He had built the sport, but it was moving on. Still, Chuck believed he could keep going. His 2018 return under Golden Boy MMA was a disaster. At 48, nearly a decade removed from his last fight, Chuck faced Tito Ortiz again. He was not the Iceman anymore, just a man chasing his past. At press events, his speech was slow, his answers shaky. Fans were torn between nostalgia and fear. Tito, younger and active, needed no trash talk. On November 24, 2018, in Inglewood, California, Chuck looked stiff and slow. Midway through the first round, Tito landed a light right hand, and Chuck crumpled. The crowd was silent, heavy with sadness. The MMA world called it reckless. Even Tito seemed uneasy, wishing Chuck well. Chuck claimed he felt fine, but his slurred speech and slow movements told a different story. Golden Boy MMA folded, and Chuck's comeback became his legacy's final blow. Life after fighting has been tough for Chuck. The 2018 loss ended his career for good. No more training camps or weigh-ins, just a search for meaning without the cage. He tried reality TV, like Celebrity Big Brother, and made brief UFC appearances. But fans noticed his decline. His speech slurred more, his eyes less bright. Money troubles persisted. He sold properties, tried business ventures like a cannabis company and clothing line, but nothing lasted. In 2020, he and his wife, Heidi Northcott, divorced after 2 kids. His UFC executive role was gone, and his ties with Dana White grew tense. Chuck appeared at UFC events only when invited, with no steady income or endorsements. His Instagram shows him shadowboxing alone, no team around him. He gave his body and mind to MMA, but the sport has little room for him now, not as a coach, commentator, or regular figure. Chuck Liddell remains a legend. His name is etched in MMA history. He fought when the sport was raw, before big deals and mainstream fame. His knockouts of Tito Ortiz and Randy Couture defined an era. To longtime fans, he is the king of chaos, the mohawked warrior with a killer's calm. But to newer fans, he is the fighter who stayed too long, a warning of what happens when you cannot quit. His legacy is bittersweet. He never got a proper goodbye, no final glove drop, no roaring crowd. His retirement was forced by losses and silence. Other champions, like Georges St-Pierre or Daniel Cormier, left with respect or new roles. Chuck's story lives in slow-motion knockouts and the painful question, why did he keep going? In 2025, he lives quietly, far from the cage. The Iceman's name still carries weight, but it is tied to loss. He fought because it was who he was. Chuck Liddell is a monument in MMA, but one worn by time, standing alone not for failing, but for never letting go.